Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a great show for you today. A lot of news this week, a lot of news coming up, so stay tuned to what's going on in Ukraine. Please do, if you could, hit the like button on the stream, and please do subscribe to Tochnyi for all future content updates that we do. You can also check us out on social media, on Twitter and Blue Sky. We also post updates there. And of course, we have our website, which has a lot of work by a lot of fantastic researchers, interactive maps, articles. We had an article published by our colleague Gesh this week, who monitors Russian troop movements. I'm sure it's a very detailed and informative article, so you guys should definitely go check it out. I got to actually give it a read. I haven't had a lot of time this week, so I'm going to head on over to tochnyi.info and read that thing myself. So yeah, if you guys can, check out the website. We appreciate all your support. If you guys do have any questions for us in chat, please do ask your questions. We'll do our best to address them at the end. And for those of you watching after the fact, you can put any questions you guys have in the comments. We'll do our best to answer them. So this week, first I will provide the news report like I always do. That'll be followed by Mr. German Aid to Ukraine's report. We'll then talk a little bit about the Russian economy and some other interesting things going on in Russia with Stanimir. Then we'll discuss a little bit of extra news that didn't quite make it into my report. And then we will do all the Q&A. So without any delay, I will jump into the news. These are the main headlines as of July 13th, 2025. First up, we have operations. In the early hours of July 11th, Ukrainian drones targeted a key Russian aircraft manufacturing facility located in the Moscow region, according to the Ukrainian military command. The Lukhovets Aviation plant, affiliated with the MiG Corporation and operating under the umbrella of Russia's United Aircraft Corporation, plays a critical role in the design, production, and modernization of combat aircraft currently used in the war in Ukraine. The plant is involved in a wide range of operations, from machining aircraft parts to final assembly, flight testing, and delivery. It also carries out upgrade work on fighter jets and contributes to the development and maintenance of new aerial technologies, including unmanned systems such as the Giran, also known as the Shahed drone. Reports from residents in the area described loud explosions and visible plumes of smoke over the industrial zone, with videos showing the aftermath circulating online. Ukraine's military leadership stated that these actions are part of continued efforts to weaken Russia's ability to sustain its offensive and to pressure Moscow into ending its war. The facility is already under international sanctions, including those imposed by the US, European Union, Canada, Switzerland, and others. Despite claims from Russia's Ministry of Defense that all 11 drones involved in the attack were intercepted, there is no independent verification of that assertion. Russian authorities have not disclosed specific details about the impact. Footage shared by the Sonyashnik Telegram channel shows a Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter aircraft carrying out a precision strike on a Russian-controlled ferry crossing in the occupied part of Zaporizhia. The attack reportedly involved two U.S.-supplied GBU-62 bombs modified with JDAM-ER kits for extended-range guidance. The target was a makeshift bridge built to replace a previously destroyed road crossing near the town of Vasilivka. The strike resulted in the destruction of a critical transport link used by Russian forces. The footage indicates that the bridge, which was functioning as a primary logistics corridor, was effectively destroyed. This crossing has been essential to maintaining supply lines and troop movements, particularly for Russian units engaged in ongoing operations near Kamyanske. The success of the operation was attributed to a broader Ukrainian effort to disable Russian air defense systems in the area, including a boot platform, thereby enabling more freedom of action for Ukrainian aircraft. The destroyed crossing disrupts what had been the only paved route supporting Russian troop movements in the sector. Since late June, Russian forces have been carrying out a sustained push in the region, gradually displacing Ukrainian positions beyond the Yachin Krok River. Their advance has extended across the now dry basin left by the Kakhovka dam breach, resulting in partial control over Kamyanske and penetration into nearby settlements such as Stepove and Lobkove. On the morning of July 11th, a significant drone assault struck defense production sites in the Russian city of Tula. The attack involved drones resembling the Iranian-made Shahed-type drones. These are like Ukrainian versions of that, and was reported by the outlet Astra, with supporting footage shared by local residents. Explosions were reported in the Proletarsky district, an area that hosts several of Russia's most prominent military production sites. The sites targeted include JSC-KBP Instrument Design Bureau. I'm glad they spared me saying all the Russian of those acronyms. Known for its development of precision-guided munitions, JSC-NPO Splav, which manufactures multiple launch rocket systems, and the joint stock company Shcheglovsky Val. I couldn't get away that easily. A major enterprise responsible for producing a range of guided weaponry for ground forces, air defense platforms, and small arms. These facilities form the backbone of Russia's defense manufacturing sector and had been previously targeted by Ukrainian drone strikes earlier in the year. The Ukrainian forces have for the first time destroyed a North Korean Type 75 multiple rocket launcher system used by Russian forces. The strike was carried out by the 1st Presidential Operational Brigade under the 1st Azov Corps of the National Guard, as reported through their official Telegram channel. The engagement took place in the Kupiansk sector and was captured on video. The North Korean MRL was first detected by a reconnaissance drone, which confirmed its identification before a separate drone equipped with munitions was launched to neutralize the system. The specific Type 75 is a North Korean-produced copy of the Chinese Type 63 system and fires 107mm rockets. Depending on its configuration, the system may feature between 12 and 27 launch tubes, depending on whether it is towed, vehicle-mounted, or ship-based. The launcher destroyed in this instance had been mounted on a UAZ-3303 vehicle, an adaptation aimed at improving its tactical mobility. To achieve this, Russian forces removed the trailer wheels and welded the launcher's frame directly to the vehicle chassis. This modification did not include a rotating base, meaning the launcher remained fixed in orientation once mounted. Two types of 107mm ammunition are associated with the system based on markings and Russian documentation: a high-explosive fragmentation shell and a cluster-type shell, which carries 15 submunitions. On July 11th, Ukrainian forces successfully brought down a Russian Shahed-type drone over Odessa using an interceptor drone, according to official reports. The event occurred during an overnight aerial attack and was recorded by residents of the city. Initial attempts to neutralize the incoming drone with machine gun fire were unsuccessful due to the target's speed and the poor visibility of the low-light conditions. The interceptor drone engaged the Shahed directly, colliding with its central structure and causing it to break apart mid-flight. Designed for rapid response, these drones are capable of reaching high speeds within seconds and are equipped with fragmentation warheads tailored for neutralizing unmanned aerial threats. The payloads are engineered to deliver damage both through direct impact and proximity blast, making them effective even without precise contact with the enemy drone. Interceptor drones are increasingly being integrated into Ukraine's layered air defense systems to strengthen protection over urban areas. Multiple domestic companies are involved in developing the technology. One group, Wild Hornets, who we interviewed on Tochnyi, has recently manufactured a large number of these interceptors, specifically to counter Shahed-type drones supplied by Iran and used by Russian forces. Another system, the Sting interceptor, was introduced in 2024 with similar operational goals. Officials emphasize that expanding the use of interceptor drones is expected to enhance the defense of civilian infrastructure and reduce non-combat casualties during Russian drone raids. Ukrainian forces have achieved a battlefield milestone by capturing Russian soldiers entirely through the use of unmanned systems without deploying any infantry. The 3rd Separate Assault Brigade reported on July 9th that this operation, which took place in the Kharkiv Oblast, marked the first time in recorded history that ground-based drones compelled enemy troops to surrender. According to the brigade, the operation involved a coordinated use of FPV aerial drones and kamikaze ground robots to assault entrenched Russian positions. The Ukrainian systems first destroyed fortified bunkers using explosive-equipped drones. As one of the ground-based robotic platforms advanced toward a partially intact Russian position, the remaining enemy personnel reportedly surrendered without further resistance. The unmanned systems then directed the surrendering soldiers away from the combat area, where they were eventually taken into custody by Ukrainian troops. No specific date for the operation was disclosed, but it was confirmed to have taken place in northeastern Ukraine. On July 10th, Ukrainian military intelligence, in coordination with local partisan groups, carried out a joint operation in the occupied city of Melitopol, resulting in the destruction of a Russian command post and the death of 5 Russian soldiers, according to a statement from the main intelligence directorate. The strike reportedly occurred as Russian National Guard troops were unloading equipment from a military vehicle. The explosion destroyed not only the personnel, but also a satellite communication station that Russian command had been using to manage their operations in occupied territory. The Atesh partisan movement also is said to have carried out acts of sabotage on railway lines both in the Russian city of Volgograd and the occupied Crimean settlement of Uvarove. Ukraine's military intelligence directorate was reportedly responsible for an explosion that damaged a key gas pipeline in the Russian city of Longa-Pas, located in the Tyumen Oblast in western Siberia. They stated that the operation successfully disrupted a section of the pipeline that serves critical military industrial zones in the Russian regions of Chelyabinsk, Orenburg, and Sverdlovsk. The pipeline is situated approximately 3,000 kilometers from Ukraine's border. As a result of the incident, gas supply through the pipeline has been reduced by 25 million cubic meters. It is also estimated that the indirect economic losses could reach around $76 million, factoring the impact on downstream operations and disrupted energy delivery to Russian defense-related facilities. Colonel Ivan Voronich, a long-serving officer in Ukraine's domestic intelligence agency, was shot and fatally wounded in Kyiv's Holosivsky district on the morning of July 10th. According to reporting from the New York Times, Voronich had spent decades in the agency and at one point led the 5th Directorate, a specialized operations unit with a mandate that included high-risk missions beyond Ukraine's borders. This unit has reportedly been involved in targeted eliminations, including the 2016 operation against Arsen Pavlov, known as Motorola, a notable pro-Russian militant leader in eastern Ukraine. Additional confirmation of Voronich's background came from Ivan Stupak, a former Ukrainian intelligence officer who commented to the Ukrainian outlet NV that the 5th Directorate had been responsible for a series of covert actions against figures aligned with Russia during and after the onset of the war in 2014. Voronich was gunned down by an unidentified attacker using a pistol. The assailant fled the scene immediately after the shooting. As of now, there is no public information on suspects or motive, and the circumstances around the killing remain under investigation. Up next, we have economy and aid. Norway has pledged to finance the acquisition of 1 Patriot air defense system for Ukraine, a move confirmed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky stated that further European support is expected once the manufacturer and the U.S. government provide a definitive production and delivery schedule. The U.S. administration is also reportedly reviewing the potential transfer of another Patriot system directly from its own inventory to Ukraine. This consideration is occurring in parallel with talks between Germany and the United States. Berlin is seeking a formal commitment from the U.S. Defense Secretary to supply 2 Patriot systems, which Germany intends to finance. Am I allowed to talk about this? Is German aid to Ukraine going to hire a Bitcoin assassin to take me out? Anyway, bottom line is Ukraine should be getting some Patriot systems at an indeterminate point in the future. In a case of reverse aid, the Trump administration has resumed shipments of certain weapons to Ukraine following a brief suspension initiated by the Pentagon, according to reports from Reuters and the Associated Press. The shipment pause, reportedly ordered by U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth without prior coordination with the White House or the State Department, temporarily halted deliveries of key military systems, including Patriot air defense missiles and other precision-guided munitions. While the full shipment details remain unclear, U.S. officials confirmed that the resumed deliveries include 155mm artillery shells and Gimler's rockets. The earlier interruption also reportedly delayed the transfer of 30 Patriot missiles, 8,500 artillery shells, and 250 Gimler's rockets, as well as 142 Hellfire air-to-surface missiles. The decision to pause shipments came amid an internal review of U.S. weapon stockpiles, but caused surprise in both Kyiv and among European allies, given the timing of the intensified Russian aerial attacks. President Trump later stated that he was not informed of the pause beforehand and committed to continuing military support for Ukraine, particularly as the country faces ongoing mass missile and drone strikes. Russia launched its largest aerial assault to date on July 9th, deploying more than 740 projectiles, followed by another large-scale strike on July 10th. Kyiv has continued to press for more air defense systems, especially Patriot batteries and interceptors, to counter the barrages. When asked about the potential delivery of another Patriot system, Trump acknowledged Ukraine's request and said the administration would review the matter. The State Department and the White House confirmed the decision to proceed with arms deliveries, but did not disclose specific timelines or quantities. On July 11th, Ukraine finalized an agreement to begin manufacturing gunpowder on U.S. territory, marking a significant step in bilateral defense cooperation. The announcement was made by Oleksandr Kamyshin, a presidential advisor, during the Ukraine Recovery Conference held in Rome. The deal is part of a broader push to deepen Ukraine's defense industrial ties with Western partners amid ongoing efforts to rebuild and modernize the country's military-industrial base. The company involved in the new U.S.-based production line has previously worked with Ukraine on other projects. Kamyshin emphasized that this level of collaboration, which seemed out of reach just 2 years ago, is now developing into a structured and sustained joint effort. The agreement was signed in the presence of General Keith Kellogg, who serves as a special envoy for U.S. President Donald Trump. It is one of the over 5 defense-related agreements reached during the conference, encompassing both publicly disclosed and classified arrangements. These include intergovernmental accords, a memorandum of understanding between Ukraine's Council of Arms Manufacturers and Italy's Association of Arms Manufacturers, and multiple bilateral agreements between countries. The 4th Ukraine Recovery Conference was hosted in Italy on July 10th through 11th. It focused on long-term reconstruction and included participation from international institutions, private sector representatives, and civil society groups committed to Ukraine's recovery and future development. Former Russian Transport Minister Roman Starovoyt was found dead from a gunshot wound in Odintsovo near Moscow following his dismissal by President Vladimir Putin on July 7th. The pro-government newspaper Izvestia, citing unnamed sources, reported that Starovoyt took his own life. His removal from office came shortly after a wave of operational failures within Russia's transportation sector, including the grounding of nearly 500 flights on July 5th through 6th due to Ukrainian drone threats and an explosion aboard the Eco-Wizard tanker at Ust-Luga port that caused an ammonia leak. Starovoyt, previously sanctioned by Ukraine and Western nations for his involvement in the war against Ukraine, had served as governor of the Kursk Oblast before assuming the role of transport minister in May of 2024. According to Russian media, his death may be connected to an ongoing criminal investigation. His body was discovered inside his private vehicle with a gunshot wound, reportedly caused by an honorary firearm received from the Interior Ministry back in 2023. Some sources suggest that Starovoyt may have come under legal scrutiny as part of a broader probe into embezzlement in Kursk Oblast. Former deputy and acting governor Alexei Smirnov, who was arrested on suspicion of misappropriating over $1 billion rubles during the construction of defensive infrastructure in the region, is said to have given testimony implicating him. Several of Starovoyt's former subordinates are also reportedly under investigation. Russia's investigative committee confirmed that a team from its main investigative directorate is examining the case, with suicide currently considered the most likely cause of death. The precise timing remains uncertain, although State Duma Defense Committee head Andrei Kartapolov acknowledged the death and noted only that it occurred, quote, quite some time ago. On July 6, nearly 300 flights were canceled across multiple Russian airports as a result of Ukrainian drone activity, according to Russia's Federal Aviation Agency. The disruptions impacted major transportation hubs, including Moscow's Sheremetyevo Airport, St. Petersburg's Pulkovo Airport, and Strigno Airport in Nizhny Novgorod. The cancellations followed similar restrictions as the night before, amid escalating drone threats that have prompted widespread airspace closures across western Russia. Rosaviatsa cited both drone-related airspace restrictions and adverse weather conditions, such as strong winds over Moscow, as reasons for the disruptions. Significant congestion formed at Sheremetyevo as stranded passengers awaited further updates. In addition to the major hubs, flight restrictions were also imposed on smaller regional airports in Ivanova, Kaluga, Pskov, and Tambov. Up next, we have international relations. On July 7th, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree expanding the legal framework for military recruitment by allowing foreign nationals to serve in the Russian armed forces during periods of mobilization. This move comes amid ongoing efforts by the Kremlin to reinforce its military ranks without triggering another politically sensitive mass conscription. Putin's 2022 partial mobilization order remains legally in effect and has not been formally terminated, as doing so would require a separate presidential decree specifying an end date. Previously, the enlistment of foreigners into the Russian military was restricted to periods of martial law or declared state of emergency, neither of which Russia has officially implemented, despite the scale of its invasion in Ukraine. The new decree also authorizes qualified personnel who have reached the age limit to sign contracts with major state security agencies, including the Federal Security Service, Foreign Intelligence Service, and other similar entities. This extension of eligibility is intended to widen the recruitment pool for both military and intelligence sectors. Moscow continues to rely on financial incentives, relaxed enlistment criteria, and targeted recruitment campaigns to maintain a steady intake of new personnel. Western intelligence estimates cited by the Wall Street Journal indicate that Russia is currently bringing in between 30,000 and 40,000 new military recruits per month. In parallel, Russia has escalated pressure on naturalized citizens to fulfill military obligations. In March, Putin approved the largest conscription round in over a decade, calling up 160,000 individuals. Although officials claim these conscripts are not sent into combat zones, human rights monitors and relatives report widespread coercion into signing military contracts. In May, an investigative committee stated that 20,000 naturalized migrants were deployed to Ukraine after failing to register for service. A law passed in the summer of 2024 further reinforced these measures, allowing the government to strip citizenship from naturalized individuals who evade military registration. On July 9th of 2025, the European Court of Human Rights issued a landmark ruling recognizing extensive and ongoing violations committed by Russia in Ukrainian territory under occupation since 2014 and throughout its full-scale invasion launched in 2022. The ruling came in the interstate case of Ukraine and the Netherlands versus Russia, and according to Ukraine's Ministry of Justice, the court upheld nearly all claims submitted by the Ukrainian government. The decision, delivered by the Grand Chamber, was described by the ministry as unprecedented and one of the most consequential rulings in the history of interstate human rights litigation. The court confirmed that Russia has engaged in systematic and large-scale breaches of human rights across Ukrainian-occupied regions and during the broader military campaign. Beyond addressing specific violations, the court outlined a wider legal and political context. It found that Russia is conducting a deliberate effort to dismantle Ukraine's sovereignty and legal standing as an independent state. The ECHR further warned that Russia's actions represent a broader threat to international legal order, extending beyond Ukraine and challenging the foundations of peaceful coexistence among all states. The ruling also included strong language regarding the nature of the current Russian government, stating that its behavior and policies are fundamentally incompatible with the core values, objectives, and legal standards of the Council of Europe. The decision solidifies legal recognition at the European level of Russia's conduct as both a domestic human rights crisis and a geopolitical threat to the broader European legal and political system. On July 9th, Ukraine's security service announced the arrest of 2 Chinese nationals in Kyiv on suspicion of attempting to acquire classified military information related to the Neptune cruise missile system. The individuals detained are a 24-year-old former student of a Kyiv Technical University and his father. According to the SBU, the younger suspect, who remained in Ukraine after being expelled from the university in 2023 due to poor academic performance, allegedly tried to recruit a Ukrainian citizen with access to restricted defense data. The goal was to obtain sensitive documentation connected to the Neptune system, a key component of Ukraine's coastal defense arsenal. The SBU stated that the 2 were acting with the intent to pass the information to Chinese intelligence services. A Dutch court has sentenced Russian national German Askenov to 3 years in prison for violating European Union sanctions by attempting to transfer sensitive semiconductor technology to Russian intelligence. The 43-year-old engineer had been employed in the Dutch semiconductor sector for nearly a decade, working for firms such as ASML, a global leader in microchip manufacturing equipment, and NXP Semiconductors, a major supplier of semiconductor components. Prosecutors established that Aksionov copied files containing technical specifications for chip productions from company servers onto portable storage devices. These materials were intended to be delivered to an operative from Russia's Federal Security Services in Moscow. The court determined that the information in question could enhance Russia's military and strategic capabilities, posing a direct threat to Ukraine and indirectly undermining broader international security and stability. While prosecutors requested a 4-year sentence, the court issued a 3-year term, noting that the absence of evidence from Aksionov received payment for the attempted transfer. Aksionov denied the charges, claiming he kept the files for personal professional use. However, the court rejected his explanation, citing the nature of the files and the circumstances under which they were handled. You asked me 3 to 4 years for international espionage for military purposes is a little light, but, what are you going to do? A group of British men have been convicted in connection with an arson attack on a warehouse in Leighton, East London, carried out on behalf of Russia's Wagner Group. The March 2024 fire caused around £1 million in damage and targeted facilities supplying humanitarian aid and Starlink equipment to Ukraine. 2 individuals set the fire while another waited nearby in a car. They were found guilty of aggravated arson with the intent to endanger life. The 2 who planned the attack admitted to the charge and became the first individuals convicted under the UK's National Security Act of 2023. They also plotted further attacks on London businesses owned by Russian dissident Evgeny Chichevarkin, which were not carried out. Evidence to convict included surveillance footage, phone records, and incriminating messages. One message read, quote, "Bro, LOL, it's on the news. We done damages." One of the individuals was also proven to have been in contact with a Wagner operative, expressing interest in conducting further operations, and was arrested with 20,000 pounds in cash, drugs, and a Russian flag. Additional defendants faced related charges, including one who was found guilty of withholding information about the Mayfair plot, while a few were acquitted. Sentencing is scheduled for the autumn. UK officials emphasized that the conviction sent a strong signal against foreign-directed threats to national security. Andriy Kolomiets, a Ukrainian Euromaidan activist and recognized political prisoner, has returned to Ukraine after spending a decade imprisoned in Russia. His release, announced on July 11th by Ukraine's foreign ministry, follows his formal release from Russian prison in January of 2025, though he remained in detention until this month at a deportation facility in Russia. Russian authorities deported Kolomiets on July 7th at a border crossing with Georgia, leaving him there without valid documents. Ukrainian diplomats in Georgia intervened, issuing the necessary papers and arranging his travel through Georgia and Moldova before he finally returned to Ukraine. Kolomiets' Russian lawyer, Mikhail Benyash, revealed that his client was held for several days in a basement at a Georgian checkpoint, where more than 60 other Ukrainian nationals were also being detained under similar conditions. Kolomiets was reportedly the only one allowed to continue on to Ukraine. Upon his arrival, he was briefly taken to a territorial recruitment center for document checks before being released. Kolomiets had been arrested in 2015 while visiting Russia and was later convicted by a court in occupied Crimea for alleged offenses related to the 2014 protests in Kyiv. He later retracted his confession, citing torture. His case was widely condemned by human rights organizations, including the European Parliament and Russia's Memorial, which designated him as a political prisoner. And that wraps up the main headlines of this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Yeah, hello guys, that would be me. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. And this week we had a lot of good updates. We are starting with an update made public on Thursday. The Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy reported that they plan to invest another 30 million euros into the Ukraine Energy Support Fund, through which spare parts and equipment for destroyed energy infrastructure in Ukraine is being financed. The German government has already provided around 400 million euros for this fund, making Germany by far the largest contributor worldwide. Once the necessary internal steps have been completed, the sum will continue to grow with the provision of new funding, namely the 30 million euros. Next up is an update on the German financed deliveries of loitering munitions to Ukraine. Hartpunkt reported on Thursday that Simon Brünjes, Vice President Sales at Helsing, stated to journalists that Helsing has delivered 1,950 HF-1 loitering munitions to Ukraine, about half of all HF-1s firmly contracted by Germany. That's a plus of 900 loitering munitions since April 2025, when the German government stopped disclosing military assistance. Brünjes also stated that a number of HX-2 loitering munitions, which you can see on the image, were already handed over to Ukrainian operators for qualification purposes. The qualification process is expected to end in a few weeks. It is expected that at least 6,000 HX-2s are going to be delivered to Ukraine, in addition to the 4,000 HF-1s, once a binding funding commitment from the German government has been received. On Friday, Rheinmetall announced that it has already delivered the fourth forward surgical team station to Ukraine, financed by Germany. That's a plus of 2 since the German government stopped disclosing military aid in April 2025, and 6 more are to be delivered by the end of 2026. Also on Friday, the Business Development Fund and the German state-owned development bank KfW have signed a 40.5 million grant agreement to support small and medium-sized enterprises in Ukraine. The agreement aims to improve access to funding for Ukrainian micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, with a priority on those operating in deoccupied and war-affected territories, through financial instruments implemented by the Business Development Fund. On to the last update from Friday, Major General Christian Freuding, who is the head of the Situation Center Ukraine in the German Ministry of Defense, said in an interview with ZDF Heute Journal that they just witnessed the signing of a contract between a Ukrainian defense company and the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense for the production and delivery of a high three-digit number of far-reaching weapon systems financed by Germany. Didn't say missiles, he didn't say rockets, just want to point that out. He said weapon systems. The first of these weapon systems are to be handed over to the AFU already at the end of the month. Last news item for this week, just a very small update on the Lynx IFV, because I think some of you might be interested in that. Today, Bild published a news article about Rheinmetall, which featured a lot of information provided by Rheinmetall's CEO Armin Pappberger, thanks to an interview he gave to Bild. According to Pappberger, even after 6 months, or at least 6 months, the Lynx IFV is still undergoing trials in Ukraine, and it doesn't look like a contract has been signed yet. I wrote a more detailed article about that, still a short one, but a lot of more details in it. So in case you're interested in it, you'll find it on my website. And now, last but not least, Joseph always complains that I don't show you more footage of German-delivered weapon systems in Ukraine. I'm always replying that I have high standards and always want to show you something special. After a lot of weeks with no video for you, I today have something to show you thanks to the Air Force Command of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, which has shared this video of the German-delivered... Oh, hold on, let me mute the video. Which has shared this video of the German-delivered Skynex air defense system downing 6 Russian loitering munitions. So far, Germany has officially delivered 2 of these systems to Ukraine, valued at 194 million euros, with 2 additional systems pledged for delivery until the end of the year. And I just said officially delivered because, 2 of these systems are scheduled to be delivered until the end of the year, and since about 3 months we didn't receive military aid updates anymore, so it might already be that 1 system of these 2 is already there. And for example, which has happened before, that the Ukrainians took the opportunity, since they've received just a new system, to promote it and just shared this image. They did this, for example, last month with Iris TSLM, where they published footage, and we learned a couple of weeks later that actually when they published the footage, that was a formal handover. So yeah, I hope you're satisfied, and more important, I hope Joseph is satisfied. And yeah, that's it for my segment. So back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, it looks real cool. I liked when the drones blew up. It looked cool.
Yeah, has it advantages, has it disadvantages, the way Skynex works, but in general it's cool.
Yeah. Okay, so up next, we're going to go to Stanimir. So a lot of stuff's been going on in Russia this week. So I think we'll start with like a more general economy report, which Stanimir does every week, and then we'll move into some of the more specific topics, more curious things going on in Russia. So Stanimir, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So to start with the bigger news from this week, in the first half of 2025, Russian container traffic via Russian railways decreased by 2.9% to 3.78 million TEUs. This is a notable decrease, as at least for container traffic, the stats have been going up until now. The Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs also said that it expects in July the Russian central bank to lower the interest rate by 2% to 18%. These are the same guys that last month said that a decrease by just 1% was enough for them, so they keep pushing the Russian central bank. We have data on the number of bankruptcies from Q2 2025. So when it comes to legal entities, those decreased by 30.4% to just 1,580. For all of H1 2025, the decrease is 3,208. The number of companies declared bankrupt is 3,208, which is a decrease of 26.5%. However, when it comes to personal bankruptcies, which is something that's relatively new in Russia from the last 2 years, there was an increase of 35.7% in H1 2025 to 259,800 people declared bankrupt. So for the majority of them, or 97%, they were initiating a bankruptcy procedure themselves to run away from debt and recover somehow. For 2.1%, it was initiated by creditors, and for 0.6%, it was initiated by the Federal Tax Service. When it comes to banking, we got the stats for the first half of 2025 for the Russian mortgages. So they decreased the issuance by 47% to just 1.5 trillion rubles. And again, 78% of all mortgages were given with a state preferential mortgage program, with 69% of those being the family preferential mortgage program. That is a 6% interest mortgage program, where the remainder of the interest is covered by the Russian federal budget. Also, linked to the previous info about the decrease in bankruptcies, in the first half of 2025, Russian banks are 3 times less likely to initiate bankruptcy cases against companies operating commercial real estate, because they fear they're going to end up with a lot of shopping centers on their books. And this is something that's been covered with a lot of shopping center operators saying that they have difficulty paying their loans, because most of those loans were with a flexible interest, which increased when the central bank raised the interest rate. So they're now facing bankruptcy en masse. But because the Russian banking sector doesn't want to start suddenly being in the renting business, it's pausing its initiation of bankruptcy cases against them. When it comes to commodities and coal, this month Russian metallurgical coal exports dropped to a 10th-month minimum. They were at 2.23 million tons exported, which is 23% less than in May 2025 and 45% less than in June 2024. So both a month-on-month and a year-on-year decrease. Turkey, however, increased its coal imports in the first half of 2025 to the point that high-caloric Russian coal share in their imports was 88%. The reason for this is the low prices that Russian coal has reached and lack of hydroelectric power in Turkey due to the heat right now. So when it comes to Russian prices, if the average price is around 97 USD per 6,000 calorie coal, for the Russian equivalent, it's around 70 USD. So that's why Turkey is jumping on the deal. When it comes to gas and oil, Russian gas stations are now back in the same place they were last year in September, with the margin for their selling of the main types of gasoline, A92 and A95, falling to 2 and 3.5 rubles respectively per liter. And this is due to the high wholesale prices of gasoline currently in Russia. They still haven't fixed that problem, to the point that in some cases, Russian gas stations are selling A92 at a loss. So finally, for commodities, Russian wheat exports for July 2025 will not exceed 2 million tons. This is likely to be a trend for at least a few weeks and a few months. That's because currently the Russian ruble is too strong and the international price is too low. So Russians will still sell their wheat primarily internally into the country. Now, when it comes to inflation data, interesting data points from this week. So Russian restaurants increased their prices and are cutting their sizes of their portions. This is primarily because the price of ingredients has gone up. Previously, it used to be 25% of the dish, and now it's up to 43%. Russian alcohol production for the first half of the year has decreased by 16.1%. The decrease in June was slightly lower after a decrease of 20.4% for the first 5 months. And strong alcohol production is down 9.5% to 46.82 million deciliters. So this is, again, Russians who used to have money to buy cheaper, stronger alcohol are being priced out of the market. Sales for Russian domestic construction equipment this week, we learned that for the first 5 months of the year dropped by 41.3% to just 18.4 billion rubles. This is part of the decrease of Russian vehicle sales and Russian specialized vehicle sales that we've seen all year, and it's likely going to continue with the decrease in infrastructure projects currently in Russia. In a similar vein, the Russian Solaris Group, which is the parent company of UAZ, is going to reduce its production targets for 2025. It expects the Russian LCV market to drop by 23-25% in 2025, and thus it expects its sales to also drop significantly. One of the primary buyers for UAZ currently is the Russian Defense Ministry, so they're dependent on that, and if overall sales are going down, that means also the defense ministry is probably just decreasing their sales as well, their purchases, I mean. For the first time in the last 10 years, the average recommended retail price of new passenger cars in Russia dropped by 7% to 3.12 million rubles. That is for passenger cars and LCVs and pickups. It hadn't happened in the last 10 years. The drop is again due to declining sales for the market entirely. Also, another interesting news from this week, which was quickly rebutted, that the Ural Chambers of Commerce and Industry reported that by the end of 2025, there will be 1 million Indian migrant workers coming to Russia to fill the vacancies. And quickly, the Ministry of Labor said that, no, that's not happening because the entire migrant quota for people from outside of Russia that require visas is 233,900 workers, and the total quota for India is around 72,000 people. And the final interesting data point from this week, the price of taxi fares in Moscow rose up by 16%, and the price of taxi fares in St. Petersburg and Leningrad region rose by 18%. These are year-over-year data, so we can see that the inflation is still strong. Now, back to inflation. For the inflation and debt this week, we had finally the large increase in inflation for the first week of July. For the first week, it was 0.79%. I expected it to come out a bit higher, but that is still a high inflation figure. And for the year so far, the inflation has been 4.58%. Remember that the Russian central bank's target is around 4%, so they're not reaching it this year either. And finally, Russia's Ministry of Finance managed to sell two bond issues this week. The first one was at 67.993 billion rubles, and it came at a yield of 15.03%, which is interesting to see that the yield can still jump over the 15% boundary. And the second one sold a lot less, 645 billion rubles. And this time the yield was much lower at 14.58%, hence the smaller sale. And I think that's for the economic news from this week.
Okay, so if I took away one thing from that, it was that the Russian, so I guess like to summarize the general situation, you had the Russian finance ministry led by Nabulina, who's kind of a reasonably competent technocrat. She was saying we need to keep the economy cooled down, right, with central bank policy because it's kind of overheating. And basically the oligarchs were telling Putin like the opposite, that like in order to keep the war economy going, we've got to like not put the brakes on, basically. And presumably Putin, for the reason that he wanted to continue the war, he said, okay, I got to listen to these guys. So that it sounds like the data is kind of showing that the result now of that power struggle being won by the oligarchs who wanted to keep the economy heated up is now causing this runaway inflation. Is that accurate?
No, the runaway inflation is something that we spoke about the previous weeks. It's the increase in the utilities prices all over Russia. So that was scheduled for the 1st of July. And as soon as they jumped, everything jumped with it. And we're going to see tailwinds of that throughout the following few weeks. As to whether the oligarchs won, it wasn't just the oligarchs, it was ministers, it was state officials, and I think all of them have managed to successfully push her to start lowering the interest rate. But we're going to see inflation from that a bit later within the year, not so soon. And also, she's not the head of the finance ministry, as you said. That's Siluanov.
Okay, yeah. I make a lot of mistakes in the details, so thanks for your corrections. Yeah, cool. So next two topics that we wanted to talk about this week. The first is a pretty important one, is that Russia stopped working on an aircraft carrier that they've put a lot of effort into. presumably for budgetary reasons. But Stanimir, if you wanted to talk about the situation with the aircraft carrier.
Yes, so we learned that they stopped work on modernizing the Russia's only aircraft carrier, the Kuznetsov, probably. They've already spent tens of billions of rubles on the modernization. The carrier suffered 2 fires during the time it was repaired. It caused the destruction of one irreplaceable for Russia floating dry dock. And currently they've decided to probably cut their losses and stop the entire modernization. And maybe they're considering even scrapping the thing. So it's been a net drain for the Russian defense industry, for defense ministry, and they've decided to cut their losses at this point. They also have a similar project that's more advanced in terms of where it's gotten in terms of modernization. That's the Admiral Nakhimov. But that one is almost done, so I'm guessing they won't stop work on that. That one is undergoing factory trials currently. That is shipyard trials after it got overhauled.
Yeah, so it's a pretty big deal, I would say. Like the Russia, I don't know, they've had aircraft carriers for like a long time now, since like what, the 50s or the 60s. So if they genuinely scrapped it, it would be pretty significant. But the fact that they aren't really able to modernize the one they have, like it's pretty outdated already. So I don't know. They effectively don't have an aircraft carrier at this point that's of much use. So it's, I don't know, pretty big deal in terms of Russian history, I guess, naval history.
I would say that they never really had a functional aircraft carrier in the terms we understand it, because its flight complement was underwhelming, because neither the Su-33 nor the MiG-29K are great aircraft. It had a feature where it had missiles against ships, but to launch the missiles, you had to stop flight operations, open the hatches in the middle of the flight deck, and start pouring water inside the silos, because these were submarine-launched missiles, and to launch them, you need to launch from beneath water. So you wait for 30 minutes for the pumps to throw in water into the hatches. Last I heard, when they were sending it to Syria, I think they just welded the hatches shut, so they don't even use those missiles. And it's been nothing but trouble for them. And even before the last modernization, it was every few years going into repairs for a significant amount of time and for a significant amount of money. And it was a big drain on their military spending.
Yeah, I guess maybe they just weren't meant to have an aircraft carrier. I don't know, but yeah, definitely big news that they're giving up their plans to modernize it. There's some people saying that they're scrapping it. That hasn't been confirmed yet, but as Stanimir said, that it seems pretty clear that they're considering it at this point. Just because if you can't modernize it, and you don't have the money to, like, what is it really worth? But yeah. So anyone have any thoughts about the Russian aircraft carrier before we move on? Okay, so the next topic, this is definitely the biggest news, I would say, of the week in terms of Russian domestic news, was that the transport minister, took his own life, according to official reports. However, the circumstances are definitely suspicious. I did my best in the news report to cover the absolute basics, but that was sort of a filtered, obviously the sources are in Russia, and what I presented was the Western media filtering through the Russian media reports. So it's, I think that the basics were solid, but, obviously it's a much bigger story in Russia, and all the sources are in Russian. And Stanimir's looked at what's been going on in terms of the Russian media and what the Russians are saying about all this. So Stanimir, can you talk about anything we actually know for sure about the untimely passing of the transport minister of Russia?
Yeah, so what we know is that there is no official version, and there is no consensus between the different media outlets on what the version exactly is. So according to some, the death occurred not on the 7th, but on the evening of the 5th, and he was only discovered a bit later after that. And he was actually already dead by the time he was going to be dismissed as Minister of Transport, which, however, doesn't line up with a few press releases, because on the 6th, the Ministry of Transport said that he attended a meeting on the strike at the tanker in Ust-Luga, and that he was also in a meeting somewhere on the 7th in the morning, so just before he was dismissed. According to another version, he actually had a meeting, talked with friends and relatives, left, and then in the afternoon of the 7th, like this is happening all on the 7th, he was discovered no longer among the living, next to his car, just outside of the parking lot where he had stopped his Tesla. And the versions also differ on whether he had taken his life in the afternoon or in the morning. As you said, one Russian official said that he had been dead for a while when the news struck that he had been killed. He had died, but I'm getting ahead of myself. And also we have a video which is reportedly from the 7th, where his girlfriend actually identifies the body, and she is seen next to the bushes in the next to the parking lot where the car was found by his security detail. So we don't have an official version that matches all three things. And also we have information that his girlfriend wasn't taken care of. Like, he did no preparations to help her in any way. She's a 25-year-old oncology student currently in Moscow. She was evicted from their joint residence. Her mother, which moved with her when they moved from Kursk to Moscow, was also evicted from another apartment that they occupied, and they're currently living at a hotel, and they're fearing returning to Kursk because they've already received threats of some kind, according to people who are close to them. And this makes it more suspicious that there might have been foul play, because she wasn't just his girlfriend. Even though she's so young, he left his wife and his two daughters to start a relationship with her. And at the funeral, that was attended by his wife and the two daughters, but not her, because they have bad blood between them. And also, we have mixed reports on whether Putin even sent a wreath to his funeral, with one audio message of Peskov saying, yes, he did, later being deleted by news outlets because it turned out he did not. And the entire list of the attendees at the funeral was also a bit controversial due to that change in the story by the Kremlin. So overall, I'm leaning more towards an assisted unliving rather than a personally initiated one, given the latest information we have. And again, the initial story, yes, he was going to be arrested, probably by the Russian Investigative Committee later on the 7th. But the idea is that he learned of that earlier and took matters into his own hands. And finally, one of the versions why he fell from grace, that is, as a minister who was well connected, got to the point that he was going to be arrested and removed from office, is because of the struggle by the Kovalchuk clan versus the Rothenberg clan. He was close to the Rothenberg clan because he helped them. He oversaw the construction of the Kerch Bridge, and he was head of the Russian Road Construction Agency for a while with close ties to them. So that was his backing, going back to connections to Putin. But again, we just have a big rumor mill currently without any official data.
Yeah, I would say, like, the rumor that's made it definitely back to the Western press is that, so there have been a lot of different governors of Kursk, right? When the Ukrainians invaded Kursk, it was kind of chaos. The Russians really didn't have like a plan for that. And there were, I would, like, once a month or so, I would report like there's a new governor of Kursk, and he was like one of those guys. And so, the story going around is that, like, he skimmed maybe a bit too much when he was in charge of it, in terms of the construction companies had to go in and like rebuild stuff and build fortifications and blah, blah, blah. And that he was skimming too much off the top. And then his subordinates started getting questioned. And, you know, he got sort of tipped off that like he was going to be like basically implicated and for a lot of corruption stuff. I mean, it does make sense. He was just fired. So like, one would assume he had done something wrong, or that they believe he'd done something wrong, that they got rid of him. But, you know, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, so that's I'd say the leading story. But obviously there's a lot of other background. I think like the general point is like he had a lot of enemies, or at least enough powerful enemies that there's I don't want to say it's not a surprise that it happened, but like it's understandable that this could result from that level of scrutiny, I guess. But I think something that Stanimir pointed out, we were talking about, was that like this guy's really high level, and this type of if it wasn't him deciding to end his own situation, then taking this guy out would be one of the highest level guys that have been taken out in Russia since like a much earlier period, a much darker period in Russia. I don't know, Stanimir, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's since 1991, and it was back when it was the Soviet Union. That was the last time a similar thing happened. The other closer thing that happened was a Minister of Economic Development was arrested because the head of Rosneft wanted to remove him as a threat because he was against the privatization of Bashneft, of a part of Bashneft by Rosneft, because it doesn't make sense. A Russian state company can't privatize another company. And that was when Igor Sechin, the head of Rosneft, used his connections to get that man arrested and sent into jail for blocking his deal. But we haven't seen anything like that in the modern history of Russia after 1992.
Yeah, like we talk about guys falling out of windows all the time, but it's not usually guys like this well connected and this high up. That's pretty unprecedented in modern Russian history, post the chaos of the Soviet Union or the end of the Soviet Union. So yeah, I don't know. I think we talked a little bit last week about like the fact that there are failures going on right now in terms of the prosecution of the war. And in terms of Russia's domestic economy, fingers are being pointed, blame is being assigned. And this is one way that, I don't know, the system is becoming more closed in, more narrow-minded, I think. And we're going to see more stuff like this. Like, I think it's clear from the general tone of what's going on that this is part of a larger systemic shift where Russia is moving back toward a more, I don't know, chaotic way of running things, I guess. I don't know. Like, Stanimir, do you have any other final thoughts on the transport minister?
Yeah, we have to look at it in the context that it's currently happening in. There have been studies that show that the current level of repression within Russia hasn't been this high since the times of Stalin. And it's not exactly Stalinism because it's way lower than the repression and purges then, but it's much higher than all the other periods of the Soviet Union and Russia before that. Well, Russia before that, not so much because we don't have stats for. But this is an unprecedented level of persecution currently happening in Russia.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. Cool. So that is the stuff that happened in Russia this week. Very eventful weeks, both, I'd say, in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, a lot going on. There were two other topics I wanted to talk about. So one of them actually, Stephen Bendall asked exactly my next topic, which is, can Norway and Germany buy Patriot systems out of stock somewhere, or do we have to wait for production? So I actually titled this topic, The Patriot Backlog. So we're very fortunate to have a German, a Norwegian, and Colby, an honorary American, Canadian, who knows more about American procurement and the state of the American way of doing things than I do as an American. And we're going to just sort of cover a little bit like what's going on with the Patriot stuff. So, sorry, we forgot to talk about airports too. I talked a little bit about it, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the Patriot stuff. I wanted to start with, I guess, German aid, because that's the most. I think that's the most logical place to start. So, Mr. German aid, as far as I understand, the German government has gone to the Americans and said, we're willing to fund 2 Patriot systems for Ukraine, and they're kind of waiting for America to give an answer. Is that accurate?
So, what happened was that actually the Ukrainian government went to the American and asked for exactly that, what you just said, hundreds of missiles and 2 Patriot systems, and or Patriot fire units to be precise. And they didn't make any progress for weeks. And then the Ukrainians turned to the Germans and said, "Hey, we need your help. The Americans doesn't want to." To oblige or whatever you want to say to it, with us, we don't make any progress. So can you do it? And since 6-8 weeks, something like that, the German government now in negotiations with the American side, that phone calls, personal visits, and so on and so on and so on about that. And that's where we're currently standing.
Okay, and then Erlend, real quick. I assume the situation's kind of the same for Norway. You guys have basically said you'll fund a Patriot system, and you've gone to the United States and said, like, can you do it? And you're kind of waiting for an answer.
Yeah, that's what's been reported here as well, and I assume that it happened in more or less in the same way. From my understanding, it seems like this is has been going on for quite a while.
Okay, well, that takes us to Colby. Colby, we've got 2 orders in. I'm ringing the bell here. 3 Patriot systems, please. What's going on?
Well, the challenge is that I suspect what the Ukrainians and by extension the Germans and the Norwegians are asking for is to buy existing batteries off of the United States Army, which is not something that is going to be agreed to without any sort of deep consideration, because the U.S. Army already does not have enough Patriot units for their own requirements. So parting with more than have already been donated to Ukraine is going to prove challenging. So we're just going to have to wait and see how the meetings in Washington, D.C. tomorrow and Tuesday play out. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and German Defense Minister Pistorius are expected in D.C. over the next few days for some high-level meetings. President Trump himself said that there's going to be some very significant announcements on Russia on Monday. So I expect that there will be big news on a wide variety of topics as it pertains to support for Ukraine and sanctions on Russia. How the Patriot question fits into this remains to be seen. Will the Trump administration agree to sell units from the U.S. Army? Will they just agree to orders being placed with Raytheon, which is something that Ukraine has also been seeking since the beginning of the war, and the Biden administration never agreed to that. So any of those would be positive. Obviously, the best thing for Ukraine is to get more batteries now, but that is challenging just because, again, the U.S. Army is not going to want to part with any more. 2 batteries from the U.S. Army should be now completely delivered. And then there was also a 3rd battery, which President Biden had promised to deliver from after being refurbished. And that, I don't know what the status of that is. It's certainly not delivered yet, because that was going to be much longer lead times, because they needed to do deep refurbishment of those assets to put together another battery for Ukraine. So we'll see what happens. Of course, additional ammunition is also really important. Ukraine already doesn't have nearly as much ammunition for their existing Patriot assets. So providing additional batteries without a accompanying increase in the number of interceptors they're receiving is not going to be super, super helpful. So that's something that also needs to be addressed. luckily, the U.S. still has fairly deep stocks of Patriot interceptors, particularly the older ones. When we talk about PAC-3 MSE, which is the newest interceptor, there's a lot less of those, but PAC-2 and even PAC-1 standard, we know that some of these missiles have been provided to Ukraine as well, and I suspect that there's an opportunity to send a lot more of those, given that we've seen an awful lot of other very old ordnance end up in Ukraine and still be in usable condition. So if some effort is put into that, I think that the ammunition problem can be addressed somewhat, although with MSE, that's still going to be challenging just because there's a lot less of them that have been delivered to date to the Army, and production is still below what it really ought to be. But the Army is moving in a positive direction on that as well now, with at least increasing the acquisition objective and some rumors about them moving to order more. And Lockheed is certainly putting in a lot of effort and money on their own as well to increase production. And I will have an article on PAC-3 MSE production coming out sometime this summer that'll share some news on that front.
Okay, so hopefully that answers everyone's question, which is, there's all these orders for Patriots, like where are they? Where are they coming? Germany to Ukraine did a FAQ of this a little while ago himself, and I'm sure Erlend's kind of been hearing in the local press what's going on. But the general answer is, people at Tochnyi have been following this for a while. There hasn't really been a clear answer. But hopefully tomorrow we'll get a clear answer from the U.S. about what's going on with this. So yeah, keep your ears open tomorrow, or I guess on Sunday when we'll talk about what happened tomorrow, and hopefully Ukraine will get, as Colby said, hopefully they'll get things either now or at the very least like refurbished quickly, or potentially they'll get like new batches that are made in terms of orders from Raytheon or whatever. So. I think that's the Patriot issue set up. Colby, are there any final thoughts on that, or is pretty well cover it?
I think that's all we can pretty much say for now. We have to wait and see, as I said, for the results of the meetings for the next 2 days to get some more information, because we're just kind of speculating at this point, but happy to answer other specific questions if people have them to the best of my ability.
Okay, thanks, guys. So very, very comprehensive answer from everyone. We're very lucky to have all three concerned parties here to hash it all out. Okay, so up next we have, of course, one of our esteemed authors at Tochnyi.info. You yourself, chat, can go to Tochnyi.info right now and check out all of our great articles, one of which was just released by our colleague Gesh. So I guess I'm going to turn it over to Erlend, and Erlend, you can set it up for us. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just, I saw Gesh roaming around, and I asked if he could come on and present his first article on Tochnyi.info. So welcome, Gesh.
Welcome.
So what is this all about? I mean, it was some kind of weird news that came out from a leak that did they hack them? What happened?
Okay, well, I think I'll just share my screen. Screen one. Yeah. So yeah, what happened is that GUR, this is the Military Intelligence Service of Ukraine, released an intercepted telegram from Russian Telegram.
So it's not is it a Telegram post, or is it actual?
No, a telegram, not a post. It's a literal telegram, as far as I could understand, or a high-level message between commanders. And what it basically said, it was an order from the acting commander, or from the chief of staff of the Southern Military District. The Southern Military District is also operating at around the Caucasus, and he required units of the Southern Military District to prepare for people to be sent to the 102nd Military Base, which is based in Armenia. And there's currently, I think, 2,000 Russian troops stationed there, and they this telegram indicated that they want to increase the manning levels there, or like increase the units there and send more people there. This could be, I mean, there's two main reasons why this might be happening. One is the tensions with Azerbaijan, because I mean, also in the last few months, I don't know if you have all seen it. I mean, there was the aircraft shot down a few months ago. Now there has been information that it was deliberate, that it was it was not a misfire or anything. They were deliberately shooting at this object. Now there have also been tensions within Russia, where some Azerbaijani mafia, to be honest, but businessmen were killed within Russia. Then Azerbaijan also, I mean, but this has been happening now. To set the timeline straight, this telegram was for the period between May 13th and June 11th. The most recent events happened after June 11th. So it was not in response to those events, just to set this straight, but there has been tension brewing between Azerbaijan and Russia, and it can be that the Russian crackdown against Azerbaijan is within Russia has been part of this whole campaign of increasing their presence there. Now, the other reason why they might increase their military presence in Armenia is Armenia itself. That Armenia tries to move away from Russian influence, that Armenia tries to move closer to the West, and that Russia wants to prevent that and make basically a Crimea scenario, or like any scenario where can they make a quick strike. Sorry, I have to go for 1 minute, or like 10 seconds. We'll be right back.
So one of the interesting things about this, in my opinion, is that...
All right, so
already. But
yes, yes.
About Armenia, like lately we've seen actually several reports of them being more and more active, participating on different forums and events in Europe. We've seen first graduates of Armenian military coming out of NATO colleges and things like that. And I guess that is also something we need to consider when we see that the Russians are increasing their military support in Armenia, and especially what kind of military, not support, military presence in their bases that they've had there for a long while.
Yes, I mean the focus of this article now. I mean, this is all basically the introduction. The focus on this article is not on the politics behind this, to be honest, because that's not my specialization. I specialize in military units themselves. So my approach to this was, well, this is gibberish for anyone who doesn't know about Russian military or anything. There's just some random numbers, and they were like, yeah, what does this mean? And I try to translate this and to give some context to what those military units are and what they might do. Sorry. Exactly. So I went and translated all those military unit numbers into the respective military units, and gave a break. Like, this is more seen as one more piece of information in this whole ordeal. I tried to translate all with my knowledge and my sources of research. I could translate nearly every single military unit number into a unit, and then I could go further and analyze what kind of units there are. So there's some interesting stuff happening here. As you can see, most of the units listed are from the 8th Combined Arms Army in this document. From this document, nearly all most units are from the 8th Combined Arms Army. Why this is interesting is, of all the armies of the Russian Southern Military District, the 8th Combined Arms Army is actually the one involved in the heaviest fighting. The 18th Combined Arms Army, I mean, this is a bit overblown. I made a small mistake there, but they are covering a portion of the Kherson front line. There's no heavy fighting there. They're losing not many men. Yeah. So they're not that involved. While there has been some more activity in the sector of the 19th Motorized Rifle Division of the 58th Combined Arms Army, it's also
I can zoom in maybe a bit. It's also not really the hottest sector on the whole front line. Like nothing compared to what's happening over here near Toretsk and Konstantinivka and Pokrovsk, where the 8th Combined Army is fighting recently and has been pushing heavily and losing a lot of men. So the question now is, why did they choose mostly units from this army and not the others that are not as involved? My interpretation of this was that they simply have way larger training contingents for the 8th Combined Arms Army. So as the losses of this unit are so much higher than likely, I don't have concrete data on this, but this is just analysis from the information that I have. As this unit has so much higher losses than the other armies, they have also way higher training levels or training contingents, and with this they can more easily take some men from those training contingents and then send them towards the 102nd military base. Whereas if they used the men that were about to be sent to the 18th Combined Arms Army, it would more seriously hinder their operations, because they would need way longer to retrain them, etc. So yeah, this is my thought, because why they have been choosing from the 8th Combined Arms Army. What I've also been doing is going ahead and analyzing what kind of units they have been choosing from. And the one thing that most sprung to my eye is that they have chosen a single medical battalion. That, like, out of all of those 51 units, just to be clear again, they will send soldiers off those units to Armenia, not those whole units. This is very important. They will just send soldiers from those units. I mean, otherwise it would completely, like, yeah, this is 3 armies. They obviously won't send all of those over there. So they only chose one single medical battalion. And the question is why? And that's why I think they don't expect to have a very drawn out conflict over there and try to make a quick military operation. Where this thought would then, earlier I presented you 2 options what they might be doing, facing Azerbaijan or doing something in Armenia. And the thought of having a very, very quick operation leads more towards them wanting to do something in Armenia itself, because a war against Azerbaijan would always take long. Azerbaijan is a very, for the region, a military capable nation, and they can't seriously expect to make some quick strike there. So yes, I mean, they've also have quite they've also sent some reconnaissance units, which are normally used in more like forward roles. So this is also an indication why it might be a more aggressive action. But yeah, this is just the basis. This is nothing like conclusive, obviously, about what they are planning to do exactly, but it's an indication. This is something we can have like as a baseline of, or like one of the starting points of our work. Exactly. So yeah, this is what I've been writing about. This is, I mean, I've been researching Russian units for more than a year now, and I think it's I'm now finally, I mean, I've been doing some work on Twitter, but I might be finally starting to start writing articles, even though it's a lot of work. And to be honest, I'd rather sit around and just research units, but I guess I have to spread the knowledge as well to all the people who might be interested in, and not just sit in the basement and go through missing soldiers all day. So yeah, that's what I've been writing about, and yeah, giving it over to you, Erlend.
Oh, thank you so much. This is very good research and also very interesting developments. As you said, there's no way we can conclude what they're actually up to, but definitely something to keep an eye out for in the future, what's happening in Armenia and the region with regards to these movements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gesh. And of course, you can go down to Tochnyi.info at any time and read Gesh's excellent article. And yeah, you can see all his sources. Yeah, it's a good website. We do our best to document and source everything. So if you like what you're hearing on the stream, but you want like a more detailed version, then the website's a great place to visit. Thank you, Mr. Gesh, for writing the article and for coming on and telling people about it. I know it was a last-minute thing to grab you and drag you on the stream.
Yeah, and I actually have to leave again. So I'm very sorry, but if someone has questions, just write it in the comments, or just private message me on Twitter or something. I'm my DMs are always open. So yeah, but I have to be heading out again. I wish you all a very nice stream and see you around.
Thanks, Gesh. Bye.
Bye.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Gesh. Colby, real quick before I forget, you haven't been around for a couple of weeks. Been busy, man. Do you have any articles that you published in the last month or so?
No.
Okay, well that answers that. Cool. Next topic is I forgot. Stanimir mentioned that he wanted to talk about the Russian airports a little bit, and yeah, I glossed over it. My bad, Stanimir. So I mentioned in the news report that there was another major airport closure, another round of people being stranded in airports. But any other context you want to give from the Russian side?
Yeah, it's more that that was just the tip of the iceberg, that the thing that happened on the 5th to the 7th of July. So that thing cost airlines, just for the 5th and the 6th, around between 17 and 23 billion rubles. So that is close to $250 million for 2 days of stoppages. And we know that it didn't involve tens of thousands of people. It involved hundreds of thousands of people, because we have data on 94,000 people being given hotel stays, and something like between 150 and 200,000 people being given vouchers for food and water at the airports, because Russian airports, like everywhere else, are expensive. It got to the point that in Pulkovo, before that, the previous week, they introduced a smoking area where you had to pay 500 rubles to get inside the smoking area. They made it free for the duration, because of how many people were stranded and getting very cross with everyone at the airport. And this has been happening over the last 3 years, but it's actually accelerated the last 6 months. So if in 2023 they were closing down of airports due to drone attacks 50 times, and in 2024 there were 100 times, or just below 100 times, that this happened to airports. For the first 5 months of 2025, it's been over 200 times. And again, this doesn't include July. This is just January through May. And what has happened is that the share of number of delayed flights that were delayed by more than 2 hours rose from 1.9% in 2023. Right now, it's close to 4.4% in 2025, just for the first 5 months. So if it wasn't an issue before that in 2023, and it wasn't a big issue, it was a slight issue in 2024, it increased just slightly. Right now, it's a big issue for Russian airlines, and it's costing them a lot of money. So Russian airlines might actually go into the red because of this. And how does this look like? So yearly in Russia, there are 1.5 million flights. 700,000 of those are scheduled flights. And currently, at least for May, every 10 flight is delayed by an hour or more in Russia primarily because of drone attacks, and it's growing. And we might see it even increase to the point that July is as bad as the entire Q1 of 2024, because for those 2 days, there were 485 flights that were canceled, not delayed, canceled, and 1,900 flights that were delayed for those 2 days. And what does it mean, delayed in this case? So if you're flying from, let's say, Sochi to Moscow, and there's a ban on flights in Moscow, your plane doesn't take off. It stays on the runway. Doesn't matter that there is no blockage of flights at your location, because there's a drone ban in force. Your flight doesn't take off. If you're in the air and your flight gets told that you can't land in Moscow or St. Petersburg, you're diverted to another airport. You stay there until the ban is lifted. If you're lucky, you stay within the aircraft for a few minutes. You get refueled, and then a change of a new crew, and then you fly back to your destination, and you're delayed only, let's say, 2 or 3 hours. If not, you can stay there for 1-2 days. And again, we saw that with the number of hotels that people were offered during those 2 days. And to put it into perspective for people who don't live in a country as big as Russia, the reserve airport for St. Petersburg's Pulkovo is Arkhangelsk, which is 750 kilometers away. And that means that basically the airline has to fly to that reserve airport, land there, refuel, and fly you back for another hour. And that means that half of its fuel went just to do that additional flight time, and it's not going to earn any money for that. And this is killing them. And I think that's something they're going to have to learn to live with, because this is the new normal. The number of closures is not going to decrease. It's likely going to even increase further. And July is going to become maybe not a regular month, but a slight peak rather than such an extraordinary event that they're talking about collapse of air travel. But the collapse is happening gradually. July was just the tip.
And, I was kind of wondering, like, why don't they just kind of power through it? Like, it sounds like a very Russian solution to just kind of ignore safety. But I assume the issue is that there's so much electronic warfare countermeasures going up when the Ukrainian drones are in a region that probably the airlines just can't operate, right? Is that they basically can't lift these restrictions, right?
Yeah, they can't lift the restrictions. And usually you have also internet outages, mobile internet, everything gets down for the duration of the ban until the drones are shot down or they hit their target. Right. And so we've also seen that they don't coordinate very well with ground air defense.
Right. So the Russian state's choices are basically like expose themselves to more drone attacks, probably on military stuff, or like do this and kind of shut down the airports and the internet every couple of days. And it's having a really serious detrimental impact on the economy, particularly the airline industry.
Yeah, and for people who are not following, there is a channel in Telegram by Rosaviatia which notifies people of those shutdowns. The shutdowns are daily. They've gotten to the point where they're daily things. So even as people on Twitter were telling me, no, you're overblowing this, it's not that big of a problem, there were people sitting in Sochi who were waiting to fly to Pulkovo because it was closed down for 3 hours at the same time. So that thing happens daily, and there are daily notifications for multiple airports.
Yeah, so it's a pretty bleak situation for Russian aviation, already facing a lot of challenges due to international sanctions. Pretty much, not. I think, as you were saying, collapse is maybe a strong word to use right now, but it seems like it's in the early stages of it, unless they do something drastic, like, I don't know, in their senseless invasion of another country. But yeah, we'll see.
Well, what I've been hoping for is for them to redirect part of the VKS airplanes to do drone chasing instead of strikes in Ukraine. That will have a serious impact.
Yeah, that would be good news if they started using some of their air assets for that. Cool. Anyone else want to talk about the Russian airport situation or no? I did have one other little thing. I mentioned last week, it seems like every week now the biggest attack on Ukraine in terms of the number of objects in the air has increased, and that every week is basically the biggest Russian air attack on Ukraine. That's also the case this week. There was an air attack where 700 objects, and a few more were used. And the sorry. So I guess what I was going to talk about a little bit is it seems to me that I don't know, this is a pretty bad situation. We're already seeing some Ukrainian developments in terms of countermeasures for, we saw German aid had the footage of the Skynex system in action. Seems to be very effective, right? We have these drones that are taking down the other drones, the counter drones. So we're seeing some evolution of the defenses, but unfortunately, we had a lot of we were concerned that Russia would scale up drone production for a long time, and for some reason it kind of wasn't materializing, and it seems like now, unfortunately, they are capable of scaling up their drone production. It seems like really, we've talked a little bit about this, but obviously the Russian economy is not doing good. But the thing is, these drones are not super expensive in terms of Russian state spending. They're, if they put a couple $1 billion into this, they can keep doing it for a long time, and they can scale up production pretty considerably. So I think it is obviously the terror attacks on civilians are terrible, but I don't think they're having a huge impact in terms of the overall direct military situation. But in general, the fact that they're used in tandem with missiles and they are taking out critical infrastructure in Ukraine, it is having a serious economic impact in Ukraine. I guess the way I would kind of frame it, and people on here are more than welcome to disagree with me, but this is kind of my layman's interpretation of what's going on. There was a period last year where the Ukrainian economy was actually looking pretty good, especially when you compared it to the Russian economy. All the signs on the Russian economy were red. Ukraine had a few green signs, and they were talking about a little bit of growth, which was huge for Ukraine. That's a really big deal. Now we're not really seeing any growth in the Ukrainian economy. I don't think they're anywhere near the situation that Russia is. Luckily for Ukraine, they have a lot of outside help, which has really helped their situation a lot. But even so, they're still facing a pretty serious situation. The actual full-scale invasion that occurred really damaged their economy pretty significantly. I want to say something like 25% or maybe 20% of the Ukrainian economy just kind of wiped out. And then from there, it's been an uphill struggle just to bounce back to that pre-war level or pre-full-scale invasion level, 2022 level. And the fact that they were growing was, even during the war, was pretty promising. But now it looks like it's pretty much they're stagnating, they're holding steady, which is no small feat considering the scale of these objects being hurled at them. But it's definitely not a good long-term. I think it's correct that these drone attacks aren't having a direct military impact on Ukraine. They're not destroying a lot of Ukrainian military equipment, for example. Obviously, the Russians aren't completely failing. They are hitting Ukrainian targets and things. But in general, I don't think 700 of these objects are, precision guided towards Ukrainian targets that are going to matter in the immediate military situation. But if these attacks continue and they keep hitting energy infrastructure and they keep hitting other critical infrastructure, the drag on the Ukrainian economy is pretty significant. And I don't know, the fact that these attacks keep happening at larger and larger scales is concerning to me. So I don't know, I guess, Erlend, do you want to talk about this a little bit? Is there anything we can really say about the issue beyond what I said, or anything you would disagree with?
My great concern is that China will support the production of drones for Russia, really, and that whatever gaps the Russians have in their industry to ramp up production, the Chinese may quite easily supply. So we've already seen some signs that that's something to this sort is happening right now, and that's really concerning. So hopefully we can address that in the West. quite harshly as well. We all know that where China is, they've been supplying stuff to the Russians for their war effort for a very long time, and also they've enabled other countries to do the same. So maybe it's time that the West actually is serious about stuff and pressure China on this.
Yeah, like I don't know. It seems to me very concerning that Russia is able to continue to ramp up the number of objects they're throwing at Ukraine. Again, I don't think that these objects are very precise or very. They're not hitting like really significant targets most of the time, but it is having a major drag effect on the Ukrainian economy, and it's obviously terrifying for civilians who have to live through this, and we can only hope that countermeasures will eventually make it less of a concern for both the citizens and the Ukrainian economy. Because it's I don't know, pretty serious issue that Ukraine's dealing with. This kind of, again, there was a period for about a year where we were saying they're going to ramp up their production, and for some reason they weren't, and presumably these were like logistical and technical hurdles that they couldn't overcome, but they seem to have managed to overcome those problems, and throwing enough money at the problem worked, and now they're able to continue to ramp up the number of drones that they're able to produce every day or every month or however you want to calculate it, and they're able to use these drones on an almost nightly basis, which is a pretty significant shift from before. I know before they were like saving up drones. So for example, right now in the summertime, they would be striking with less drones because they would save them up for the wintertime, and then they would hit the energy plants, so that Ukraine had less energy infrastructure during the winter when they needed it more. But it seems like now either they have the luxury to not need to do that, or they are still saving up some to intensify their strikes in the winter and do all that. But anyway, kind of a worrying development, but we are seeing some innovation from the Ukrainians in terms of how to deal with it, and hopefully it'll be something that can eventually be dealt with in terms of countermeasures. So.
I just want to emphasize that even if you manage to develop very good and effective countermeasures to this, it is still a very resource intensive operation to intercept these drones. So it is very demanding for the Ukrainian military. That is going to have a negative effect on the Ukrainian military effort. Another point, which is kind of not super recent, but during the last few months, I would say, the Russians have been starting to use Shahed drones more on a tactical level as well along the front lines. There's been quite a lot of reports about Shahed hits along the front lines, and that's also a worrying development. I'm not sure how effective they are operationally, but it's yet another thing that the Ukrainian units need to deal with. So that's not positive.
I don't know if it's related, but there was something I kind of didn't report on because of like how much the coverage bothered me. But it was basically like Russians put AI chips into Shaheds and turn them into super weapons. That was like a week ago, Erlend. Do you think it might be related to that? Like, have they improved the Shahed a bit and now they can use it on the front lines more, or what do you think?
I don't know what's the reason. Maybe they just have enough to spare them for frontline, where the effect is not necessarily what Russia's main goal with these drones is, which seems to be mostly targeting civilian infrastructure and also basically just pure terror bombing. Seems like they're arrived at a satisfactory level to that terror bombing, and maybe can spare more drones for the front lines, which it's not a particularly large warhead, but still, this is not something you want to have on your position. So it's yeah, it is worrying, and I think it will be better to address this for the West. It would be better to address the source of this problem, which I suspect is connected with China.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these components are like kind of cheaper dual use components. It's already pretty clear that the flow of goods from China has gone like relatively unrestricted, but we haven't seen any like direct support from the Chinese. Like the Russians still have to buy everything, and they still have to have some level of like plausible deniability about like what they're doing with it. So any kind of shift in the Chinese policy where they're actively helping with drones would be pretty serious. But yeah, so far that hasn't happened. So cool. All right. Well, we have a couple of questions. Not a ton this week. Chat's pretty quiet this week, so we'll just assume that they're just absorbing all of our information. So someone was asking about alcohol and organized crime. I don't know. I guess just maybe, Stanimir, you do cover alcohol statistics in your economic report. Is there anything you could say about the relationship to alcohol purchases, consumption, and the general Russian economy? Is it consummate with other economies, or is there something special you can learn about the Russian economy from alcohol statistics?
Not from alcohol statistics, but when it comes to alcohol, the recent bans on sales during the entire day. It's not so much that an organized crime develops as a crime on every level of every size develops to bypass sales limitations and official alcohol production. So what happened was in Vologda, they banned the sale of alcohol except for 2 hours midday. And so you started getting apps where you can call a taxi, write a comment, and the taxi will bring you vodka. Of course, you have to pay a lot more for it. You had special stores where they keep open bottles because under the law, those can be served while they're still open. So they open them during the day. Until the end of the day, they start selling them piecemeal. So there's a lot of, let's say, bootleg era, small level contraband of alcohol in Russia. I'm not sure you need organized crimes for the level of for the production of moonshine status, given which are your buyers for that alcohol.
Gotcha. So it's sort of like a gray market where, like, they're kind of testing the boundaries of the legality. But yeah, like with the open containers stuff. So the Russian state is imposing these bans on alcohol. Like, the reason behind it is economic or moral, or why have they told people they can only buy alcohol 2 hours a day?
Well, I'm going to quote the people from the Duma that Russia has a drinking problem. Even Russian officials from the United Russia Party are saying that there's a drinking problem, and there's also a problem with the sale of moonshine, and that's why they're issuing these restrictions.
Okay, so maybe more like finger pointing and sort of blaming. I mean, obviously, Russia. I would agree with them. Russia does have an alcohol problem, but it seems interesting that like right now is the time to deal with that in the middle of all this. But I would assume the general attitude is like we've got to tighten up the ship because we're going through a difficult time, something like that. So we gotta stop all these drunks running around ruining Russia. Something close to that. But okay, well, it's a good. It's an interesting topic. I think there are things to be learned from alcohol consumption patterns in a society. Go ahead.
Yeah, and also to add that it's not so much as people might think that there is a protection racket, because this is being done. The gray sale of alcohol, especially in Vologda, is done by totally legit companies that specialize in alcohol side, and they just sell it outside of the normal hours through other means. So it's not involving any pressure from organized crime, to say.
There's an American history book. It's, I don't know, more like an academic book, but it's called The Alcoholic Republic, and it's about the period before Prohibition when like American alcoholism was kind of at its peak. It's, I don't know, a very good read. So it's just an example that I can think of like the history of alcohol consumption being kind of important to a society. Anyway, Good question. We got a couple other ones. So for Europeans on the panel, do you have concerns about mass layoffs at the U.S. State Department, and how can those concerns be mitigated? I'm being silent here because I'm not a European, as you can tell by my beautiful American accent.
I have seen the news that this is happening, and I have not really dived into it. I'm guessing mass layoffs, if it's extreme, will affect mostly American citizens abroad, and also maybe some businesses that interact with embassies or something to that. But I don't know really the effects of this or what kind of layoffs we're talking about, so I can't really comment.
Yeah, and from my point of view, someone would have to explain to me why I would give a fuck about that, to be honest.
Well, I somehow got off the hook from that. Oh, go ahead, Stanimir.
For me, it would be a problem is if the people who are handling sanction enforcement are being let go, because Europe doesn't have as good of a mechanism for sanction enforcement and follow-up. That is something we need to work on. We have a lot of people who are doing just that, because the US has that in the OFAC, I think, and we don't have something that matches that, and we need more sanction enforcement.
Yeah, so far as I know, the Trump administration has not tinkered with the machinery for sanction enforcement. They did disband like a group that was supposed to look for like sanctions evasion, basically from like Russian oligarchs and stuff. But yeah, all the enforcement is still there, as far as I know.
And I just want to clarify when I say give a fuck about that. It's of course bad from a human perspective. You know, when I don't know, I haven't read any news about that. Hundreds of thousands of people are losing their jobs. It's of course very, very bad. But I think the question was related to a more deeper thing than just from a human perspective, right? And that's why I said I don't really give a fuck.
Well, hey, they asked what for the Europeans on the panel. You got the Europeans have spoken, so that you have there you have it, folks. So next question, I think final question, or I guess there's a couple more. Mr. Gao, Germany ordered 5 PAC-3 batteries a few years ago. Did Ukraine get them yet, or I guess did Germany get them yet? When will the Patriot missile production be available?
I'm not sure about the 5 PAC-3 batteries a few years ago, to be honest, because I haven't really followed all of that prior to 2022, to be honest. And I'm not sure reading about that afterwards. Yeah, I think Kobe would be the better one to ask that, to be honest.
It's eight Patriot batteries, not 5.
Yeah, but that was not when she is saying a few years ago, I'm suspecting she means prior to 2022.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and check. I don't recall there being a German order for additional Patriot batteries. I think there was just upgrade kits. But I'd have to go find the FMS approval.
Yeah, because of the 8 Colby just mentioned, I of course know about that. Was 4.4 plus 4. And no, we haven't received a single fire unit of that yet, although there was some statements that we should receive the first one this year, but the last one will be delivered, if I recall correctly, after 2029, 2030 or something. So yeah, no, we haven't. If you mean that one, we haven't received a single one, which why is of course ridiculous for Trump to say that Germany should just give another one from their stocks, because we have just a tiny fraction of what the US has and has given the same amount, and yeah.
Yeah, so there you go, folks. Next question. Comments on Russia naming France its main enemy in Europe. I mean, I don't know, man. It seems like for me, like the Russians get upset with one country for a little while, and then they like say, "Oh, they're our greatest enemy," and like, "Oh, but they're like a, you know, what a rival we have in France." But like for a while it was the UK, and it seems like, I don't know, the Russian media is responsible for a lot of this. Like there'll be some documentary on RU Channel 1 that's like, we hate the UK, and like here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put a giant bomb and it's gonna cause a typhoon and flood the UK with irradiated water. And like, I don't know, like when there's a successful storm shadow strike, suddenly the UK is the, what do they call them, like the great bastard or something. But then, you know, France says something and you know, then they're the great bastard. Like it just, from week to week, Russia makes a lot of enemies. They're always calling them their arch nemesis. I'd say historically France and Russia have been like, I don't know, not really terrible enemies. And you know, there are countries that are much bigger threats to Russia right now than France. I think it's giving France a little too much credit, to be honest with you, to call them Russia's greatest enemy. Obviously, France, I would say rhetorically has been very strong. And there is a certain like, you know, pardon the pun, but laissez-faire attitude about the French when it comes to like they provide weapons and then they just don't like they don't feel that they have a say in how Ukraine uses them. They're like, here's some weapons, go do whatever you want. Whereas other countries, I think, have been a lot more like micromanaging about like, well, you can have this missile, but don't shoot it here, and tell us before you shoot it, and all that stuff. Like, so you know, the French. I'm not trying to say the French don't deserve any credit, but I would also say that calling them a main enemy is a stretch. I'm sorry for any French people. But you know, just how I feel. It's my personal opinion, certainly not the official opinion of Tochnyi or something. Anyone else have any thoughts about France being the main enemy of Russia?
Maybe I no longer think that that the UK is part of Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And from my perspective, I just want to say I absolutely agree with you. It's I don't know. I think what strikes out most is that France, of course, the same as the UK, is one of the 2 European countries which have nuclear capabilities, right? But apart from that, I don't think there's anything which you can take very, very seriously about France. Certainly not their involvement into Ukraine. And yeah, just to give one little anecdote about French commitment in Ukraine, is that France, for example, didn't want to invest a lot in artillery ammunition, besides them actually leading the artillery capability coalition within the UDCG. So Germany has to help out and finance 1.5 years worth of 155 production from KND France, because France doesn't want to. Just for your understanding how deep France involvement in Ukraine assistance actually is. So
Yeah.
no, it's definitely not the main enemy.
Yeah, like I mean, you know, again, like France has been rhetorically strong. They have helped Ukraine, like no one's denying that. But we would just like to see a much larger scale of support, because right now, at least on the record, there's just not a whole lot to speak of coming from France compared to other countries' commitments. So, you know, it is what it is. Cool. Now that I've made an enemy of an entire country, we'll move on to the next question. Why did the U.S. announce to send 10 interceptors? Aren't those fired within a few days? Yeah, I think that's a general problem right now, is that we're talking about levels of aid in most cases, like this previously reported U.S. halting aid announcement. Obviously, it was a big deal in terms of the precedent it's setting. But if you actually looked at the numbers of aid being withheld, it was something like 8,000 artillery shells and like, you know, like a few dozen Patriot interceptors and so forth. Like, you know, the scale of this war is such that we really need to be thinking about bigger solutions here. It's not, again, like I'm not happy that aid was held, but to me, the conversation needs to be completely reframed. We need to stop arguing about whether or not 8,000 artillery shells were held up and really give Ukraine like 1 million. You know, we need basically, I would say, to take this to really be taking this seriously, we would need the countries helping Ukraine would need to invest like something to like 4 times the amount of resources they're investing right now. And we're just not seeing it. You know, countries are obviously doing a lot, and I don't want to you know, say that they're not. Obviously, Ukraine is very appreciative of all the support they're getting. I'm personally very appreciative of all the countries that are supporting Ukraine, but at the end of the day, you know, that's the reality of it. I would say to double or quadruple the commitment, and then we would be taking this more seriously.
I just want to say, if Colby doesn't want to say anything about it, if I recall correctly, the 10 interceptors were PAC-3 MSE, right? And they're not using them for drones. Definitely not. I might be wrong on that, but I think I assume that they are saving them to intercept King Jets, for example, because they are the most capable of actually doing that. So it, in my opinion, purely depends on with what Russia is attacking Ukraine, on how long they actually last, and even a single one counts. To be honest, of course, it's much less than which was held up in Poland, and I agree. It's everyone should be frustrated about that, but even 10 missiles probably means either equipment saved worth millions and millions, or dozens of human lives saved. So still be grateful for that.
Yeah, it's true. Patriots are one of the few systems that Ukraine has. I want to say maybe the only system that can truly intercept ballistic missiles, right? Colby, is that accurate? Are there any other systems that can do that?
SAMP-T as well.
Okay.
Although, I mean, its capabilities are far, far, far less than Patriot, because the radar that the SAMP-T is using is just very old and not capable for ABM search and track. So much more limited capability. And France produces Aster in extremely small quantities. So there's those SAMP-T units are often not particularly well supplied, as I understand it, with interceptors. So effectively, Patriot is doing all of the heavy lifting when it comes to ballistic missile defense.
Yeah, thanks, Colby. So, yeah, that's definitely true what Gao said, that these are specialized systems that are taking on like the most dangerous threats to Ukraine, and that, yeah, 10 interceptors definitely does matter. It's not a matter of like 10, would be fired in minutes, but also at the same time, I would say Ukraine probably needs, more than 10 interceptors in a shipment or what have you. I don't know what the rate they're going through, but like, generally speaking, the scale of stuff needs to be increased pretty significantly, considering the level of stuff Russia is bringing to bear on the situation. That's like my general understanding of the current aid situation. Yeah, so cool. I think that's most of the questions. Did I miss any questions, Erlend?
I think that was it.
Great. So yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone on the panel. We had a full panel today. I'm really happy about that. It's always good to have more people to discuss this stuff with. So thank you to our panel for coming and sharing all of your fantastic insights and analysis about what's going on. Thank you to chat. You're a little quiet today, chat, but it's understandable. It's a nice, easy Sunday. We're all having, hopefully having a good time. So thanks for stopping in. Thanks for asking the questions you did. We appreciate it. We appreciate you guys watching and supporting us. All the likes and the subscriptions really keep us going on YouTube. So thanks so much. Thanks to people who watch after the fact. We know not everyone can make it to the live stream. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to post them. We'll read them. And yeah, we'll see everyone next week at the same time, Sunday, 2100 Kyiv. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
On behalf of the brave.